Hi guys. Please let me know if you are here because it just took me like forever to try to get on to do a live video. My internet was being weird, and then Facebook was being weird, and it was just not a good scene. So if you're here and you can see me or hear me or both, hopefully, um, let me know. Write a comment so that I know that you're here. Okay, so today we are talking about, sorry, this keeps moving, so just sort of bear with me. But okay, so today we're talking about ways to overcome self-doubt. So I have a lot to say about this topic, I feel like, and probably more than just three ways that I work to try to overcome it because it sort of needs like a pretty powerful approach, at least for me. Um, so one of the things that I'll say about self-doubt to kind of like take a step back before we dive into ways to deal with it is that it's something that many people deal with, right? Like on a daily basis, essentially. So if you also deal with it, you are not alone. You are in good company because I know that it's something that I struggle with regularly. I'm sure that there are many others of you out there that struggle with this regularly. So, um, one of the things that's been interesting for me to think a little bit about is if self doubt has kind of always been part of the fabric of my thinking or has kind of always been with me, or can I trace it back to like a particular time where I've struggled with it, maybe more so than others. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing to think about because sometimes if we're not paying attention, these things kind of come up for us, and then maybe like rear their ugly heads at certain points in our lives, and then they kind of like quiet back down and we're dealing with other things, and then sometimes they kind of pop back up as a big issue. And then, they go back away. So I think that that's just part of like the natural progression of the ups and downs of life, depending on what we're dealing with and how our self-doubt or our confidence fluctuates throughout the various periods of our life. But I really sat and kind of thought about that for a little bit. Like, are there periods of time in my life that I did not struggle tremendously with self-doubt, right? Not that I struggle tremendously right now, but I do struggle in some ways. I feel like there were periods of time in my life where like self-doubt was not a significant part of my world. I felt like I had a fair amount of confidence. I felt like I kind of knew who I was. I knew my strengths. I felt pretty solid. Obviously, I would have kind of like natural periods of self-doubt kind of bubble up, but like I was trying to trace back, like when did I feel like I started having more consistent self-doubt? Like what was that, and what kind of triggered that? Because now it's just sort of around, and I was like, well, really, can I trace this back to a time when it started? If that could give me some more information around kind of how to deal with this or really what's going on. So, for me, this may sound really vain, but take it for however you want to take it. But like when I was having significant health issues in the past that I think I've shared a bit about in this group before, I had like really significant nutrient deficiencies. Um, I know I had like really poor circulation. I had anemia. My gut was a hot mess. My hormones were all over the place and they were super out of whack. So this was like the perfect storm of all of these things that can make you feel like crap, first of all. And second of all, that make your hair fall out, right? Which is like not a sexy thing to talk about, and is not something that is even easy for me to talk about, actually. It's kind of a pretty personal thing. But there are all of these things, right, that can make women's hair fall out, right? So like anemia is one of them. Nutrient deficiencies, one of them. Poor gut absorption, overgrowth of the wrong bacteria, had it. Hormone imbalances, had it. So I had like all of the things that you could have that would put you at greater risk for having hair loss. So I had like a tremendous amount of hair loss for like years. I mean, it's something I still struggle with, to a much lesser degree, but still struggle with to some amount. Although I kind of have a sense of like what triggers it now a little bit more. And stress, right? Forgot about that minor thing, stress. And not like it's not stressful to see chunks of hair falling out in the shower, right? Like and everybody's like, oh, well, you just need to like manage your stress. That'll help your hair fall. I'm like, but the hair falling is part of the stressor, right? Um, so anyway, so that was like years, really years, of like significant hair loss. Like I took pictures of that like massive amount of hair that would be in the shower, and I like showed it to my doctor, and I would be like crying in our doctor's appointments. Thankfully, she's lovely and supportive, and like didn't judge me for that. But um, it was not just a vanity thing for me, although I think that that was a part of it. I've always had really thick hair. It's always been like a part of me or part of my identity. It's a part of how I sort of see myself physically. But it was also this like indicator of health to me, right? It was this indicator of like being a vibrant, healthy woman. And not saying that you can't be and have hair loss, right? But like to me, those things were intertwined. And I felt like I was like washing down the drain my vibrancy or something, right? Like I felt like it was sort of just drifting away. And, to me, that was like a really significant issue, right? Like I dealt with all kinds of really significant health issues in the past, but that was one that I felt like I couldn't get a handle on. Like I couldn't make progress on changing it because it went on for years. I mean, I probably lost like half of my hair, truly. Which is why I wear it up most of the time. But like, to me, I felt like that sort of physical self-doubt kind of just changed how I saw myself. And it kind of bled into having like more of like a global self-doubt for me. I don't know if anybody else notices self-doubt kind of starting for them in more of like a physical place and then transitioning into like more of a global thing, or if it goes the opposite for you, whatever. Everybody's story is kind of unique and valid for them. But for me, it really shifted from this sort of like physical self-doubt into like how I saw myself. I felt very like shy almost and not confident. I didn't want people to look at me, and I didn't want pictures, and it was super uncomfortable. So I felt like that just like ballooned into this global self-doubt. And then I started doubting like my opinions on things, or how I showed myself into the world and how I interacted with people. And I felt sort of like shy in a way, like I didn't want to be noticed because of my hair loss. But, my personality was still the same, with maybe some hits in there. So I felt like that kind of sparked things for me in a negative way. And then they sort of spiraled into this more like global self-doubt. So then, then you're working on like a bigger thing to unravel, because you're trying to deal with this kind of global self-doubt while you're still not sort of physically feeling or looking the way that you want to. But you don't want to live with the self-doubt, right? You want to work on it and move past it, and make it where it's not a part of your day-to-day life. That's kind of what I mean by move past it. And I feel like it's something that we all work on pretty regularly, especially for those of us who kind of struggle with this, even daily. But like to get to a point where it's not a part of your daily life, where it's not a part of, your inner monologue pretty regularly, I think to me means you've kind of moved past it, at least for this moment in time, right? Maybe it pops up again, maybe it doesn't. But to me, that's what I mean by kind of like moving past it. And that's something that I've been working on. So I want to share some things that have been helpful to me. So I have some notes here I just want to go back through. Oh, so something else that's helpful for me is to try to like figure out how I represent self-doubt. Part of my background is in neurolinguistic programming, and I love it. And I love the idea that like we have an internal visual, or I don't know, we'll go with visual for right now, representation of things, right? Like in our mind's eye, when we talk about certain things, they kind of naturally pop up with some sort of mental representation, right? It could be like how it sounds, or what it looks like, or how it kind of feels to you. There's all these different areas that kind of make up that representation of this thing. So for me, I think about like, well, what does self-doubt, when I'm experiencing it, like what does it feel like to me? What does it, like how do I know I'm having it? Like what am I saying to myself? What does it look like for me if I imagine it? or if I imagine the thing that's happening for me that I'm feeling kind of doubtful about, what does it feel like in my body? So that was kind of helpful because it's kind of a sneaky thing, right? Like you don't always know when it's creeping up into a different situation or a different thing that you're going to say or a different scenario. So for me, it was really helpful to get a handle on like, how does this feel to me, right? Like, how do I know when I'm having a moment of self-doubt? And am I acting and speaking and responding based on that self-doubt that I'm not maybe identifying very well? So for me, it kind of had like a tightness in my stomach. I felt really like just uncomfortable. I kind of wanted to sort of like disappear in a way. I felt really shy in the moment, or like I didn't feel comfortable speaking my mind. So those were some of the things that kind of came up for me when I tried to get a better understanding of like, what does my self-doubt look like, right? If it were like a thing, or if I can imagine it in some way, how do I picture it? How would I describe it to someone else? So that was helpful because I was able to kind of put words to it. So something that might be helpful for you guys, right, in trying that, like try to imagine what it looks like for you. How do you feel when you're experiencing self-doubt? Like, what does that look like to you? Okay, so another thing that was helpful for me is has been journaling. So I'm just kind of saying like, hey, I'm really doubting myself in this area because of this. Like, why? Why is that? Why am I feeling like this? Are these true things that I'm not able to do this, or that I feel like I'm not able to speak my truth or share what feels right to me, or have this particular reaction or do this thing I want to do? Like, what feels like I'm not able to do that? So journaling about it, being able to like write it down on paper and sort of process what's happening, to me has been really, really helpful to better understand like, what is it that I'm feeling, right? Is it fear? Is it fearful of being judged because my confidence is sort of lower? Is it just not feeling sure of what I'm saying, not feeling sure of my abilities, not feeling sure of my appearance? Like, what are the things there that are driving the self-doubt at that particular moment, right? And really being able to kind of like get a handle on that voice in your head that's kind of driving some of the self-doubt, right? Because I'm wondering if you've had this experience where like you're feeling pretty good about something, you're like, yes, I can do this, I'm totally got it, I'm feeling good, and then there's this like voice that creeps in, right? That's kind of like, no, you cannot, like, you don't know enough to do this, or you shouldn't speak about this thing because, you know, you're not an expert, or people are going to judge you when you say this particular thing, so it's better to just like keep your mouth shut, right? So those things that creep in that we tell ourselves, I want you to get really, really clear on what they are and when they're happening, because that's the time when you can come back with like, no, I do know what I'm talking about. Yes, I can share what feels right in this moment, and who cares if people judge me, right? So like being able to combat some of those thoughts when they come into our head is so, so important. So journaling has been helpful for me to get a handle on that better. Another thing that's helpful for me, this is probably more than 3 things, but whatever, is thinking about a time when I felt really confident, a time where I felt like I was enough, like a time when I felt just super, super confident, like I had it together and like things were great internally, I mean. And I felt really assured and really like solid. And so I thought back to a time like this, and I was like, what did that feel like to me? Like, what do I remember that feeling like? And I tried to sort of infuse that feeling into my being or into my world at the moments when I'm having self-doubt. And I try to imagine feeling like that. And I try to think about things I would have said to myself then, or ways that I would have been thinking, you know, because that was still me. Like, I'm still that same person. It's just like transitioning what you're saying to what you used to say, right? Or during that period of time when you were feeling really confident. So for me, that was really, really helpful. Another thing, this could be like an entire other video. So I won't go on too much about it, but it's the idea of like staying in my own lane, right? And not comparing myself to others, because there's always going to be people who are doing things more advanced than you, who are doing whatever you perceive as better than you, right? Like there's always going to be that. And there's always going to be people who are struggling, who maybe are looking at you feeling like you've got it together, right? You're always going to be in the middle somewhere, because there's always people on either end, right? So I also feel like that comparison really fuels or drives some of the self-doubt for me. And that's something that has been really important and eye-opening to me, to be able to get a handle on that and kind of just staying in my lane and realizing that, you know, what others are doing doesn't affect me, or what others are feeling or saying or whatever doesn't affect me, right? And it doesn't have to. So, you know, there's more than enough room for everyone to be who they are and to be comfortable and successful and all of those things. But really being able to focus on myself and my own sort of growth and journey and not worrying about other people, that's been helpful. But that's a discipline. Let me tell you, that is not easy, right? Especially if you're feeling doubt, especially if you're feeling unsure of yourself. It just makes you more likely, I think, to compare yourself to others, right? And then you're already not feeling so great about yourself. So it just becomes this cycle where both things are kind of feeding into each other, this comparison to others and this self-doubt for you. And it's sort of this like cycle that is just self-perpetuating. So to be able to kind of stop that and jump in and notice when I'm comparing myself to others and what I'm saying to myself, right? Sometimes I'm saying like these really evaluative things and I'm like, man, that's mean. Like I would not say that to someone else, but yet I'm somehow saying it to myself in my head. So thinking about times that you're comparing yourselves to others and why and what's driving that, right? And at some point it just becomes kind of exhausting. I mean, I feel like there are moments where I just hit a wall where I'm like, I don't even give a shit, right? Like I don't even give a shit about how other people are perceiving me or how they're doing at this point, because it just becomes exhausting to be in this place of comparison. So I've been there. If that's a struggle for you, I get it. I've totally been there. But it's helpful to kind of just focus on me, stay in my lane, and really be in a place where you can kind of like send love to those people that you're comparing yourself to, right? To sort of surround them in love, and yourself too, right? But like be in a place where what you're giving out to whomever it is that you're comparing yourself to be like this positivity and lightness and love, that actually helps balance things out for me a lot. I don't know how other people would feel about that, but to me, it helps make a good internal shift. Okay, so one other thing that I'll talk about just really quickly is that I really like affirmations. Sometimes I feel like they're really speaking to the things that I need to be telling myself. So writing them down, reading them out loud, kind of journaling about them or thinking about them and just kind of repeating them to myself can be really, really useful for me. So that's part of why I'm posting them in here regularly, is because I really like affirmations, and sometimes there are certain ones that just will resonate with me really strongly, something I'm going through or something I've dealt with in the past. And I'm like, oh yeah, I need that one. I need to say that over and over again to myself. I need to kind of feel what that means. I don't want to just sort of like glance at it as I'm like scrolling through Facebook, right? I want you to stop and actually like feel what that feels like and let it sink in and integrate into yourself. So that's kind of all I want to say today, I think, about self-doubt. I feel like I said a lot in a short period of time, but if any of this kind of speaks to you or resonates with you, or you've dealt with something similar, write it in the comments. Like we can share together and sort of help support each other. So let me know if you have questions or if there's anything else that you want to share. All right, I hope you guys have a good night.